Hello everyone. John 1:15. I've had a few people write to me and they're wondering what to do with this verse. Trinitarians bring up this verse and claim this verse indicates that Jesus pre-existed, in the sense that, Jesus was this pre-existent being before he was conceived in the womb of Mary and born in Bethlehem. So let's just have a look at New American Standard translation of John 1:15. John testified about him and cried out, saying, "This was he of whom I said, he who comes after me has a higher rank than I, for he existed before me." John 1:15, New American Standard. And so you get this Trinitarian claim out of that, that goes something like this. This verse tells us that Jesus pre-existed before he was conceived in Mary. Jesus was this self-conscious pre-existent being before he was conceived in Mary. Right away, you need to note that verse 30 has almost identical language. "This is he on behalf of whom I said, after me comes a man who has higher rank than I, for he existed before me." And you can see that New American Standard is translating that similar language in a similar way. The Greek is very similar too. But notice this verse says a man. And at that point, you got to ask yourself, okay, it's referring to Jesus as a man. Did Jesus pre-exist John somehow as a man? That's not going to make sense. The emphasis is upon a human being here, not a divine being, a pre-existent divine being. So ask yourself, does this mean the human being Jesus existed before the human being John? Because that's not true. John was born before Jesus, baby John. So if you just think about it, you'll see that the Trinitarian claim, there's already a problem here with their claim. And what we're going to see about John 1:15 and John 1:30 is that it's telling us the same concept we see in this verse, John 3:28-30. "You yourselves are my witnesses that I said, I am not the Christ, but I have been sent ahead of him. He who has the bride is the bridegroom, but the friend of the bridegroom who stands and hears him rejoices greatly because of the bridegroom's voice. So this joy of mine has been made full. He must increase, but I must decrease." Jesus must increase, but John the Baptist must decrease. So we're going to see that John 1:15 and John 1:30 are pretty much saying the same thing, and there's really nothing at all there about some pre-existence idea. John went first, but Jesus will take priority over John. Pretty much what John 1:15 says. So here's the Greek text in the English alphabet. And we'll just quickly go through that and see what these words mean. Those first three words basically means that Jesus is coming behind John. That second word there, opiso, means that Jesus is behind John. And so you'll see if you check this word out, it's used to, in reference to following Jesus, because that means you'll be behind Jesus or after Jesus in sequence, right? And that's basically what this means. he who is after me or he who is behind me, okay? And it's translated as behind quite typically in English Bibles. Jesus is coming after John. Jesus is behind John in sequence. Jesus follows John in sequence. And those are typical ways this word has been translated. Basically means to be behind. Like when Jesus said to Peter, "Get behind me," in Matthew 16. This is a very important word, a very significant word in this verse. And this one, I think, is the one that Trinitarian translations, this is one of the ones that they're kind of playing with to have it come out the way they want. But it just basically means in front of. And if you translate it as in front of, I think it works always or almost all of the time in the New Testament. And here's a bunch of examples. Let your light shine in front of men. So you might see a translation that says, let your light shine before men, but it means in front of them, in front of those men. Leave your gift in front of the altar. Jesus was transfigured in front of the disciples. The nations will be gathered in front of Jesus. This is the sheep and goats judgment. Jesus stood in front of Pilate. We must be worthy to stand in front of the Son of Man, Luke 21:36. Jesus goes in front of his sheep. Jesus had done many miracles in front of them. We must all appear in front of the judgment seat. So you see how that works? It works, that in front of translation pretty much captures what this word intends. It's the basic idea. And a very interesting one is John 3:28. And we just looked at that passage where John the Baptist says, I am not the Christ, but I have been sent in front of him. In other words, ahead of him, in such a way that he's in front of Jesus, who is coming behind him. John went ahead of Jesus. He was sequentially in front of Jesus. So the next word is this one, and it's just a form of the Greek verb ginomai, which means to be. It's the verb to be in Greek. And in this case, the tense is had become or has become or has became. Something along those lines. It's the perfect tense of ginomai. Now this word is translated in various ways into English, not because it means different things, but it just won't sound right if you always translate it the same way. Quite commonly translated as the word that. Another common way to translate it is with the English word since. So we'll just keep going here and see what is going to work out the best there to make sense. So the next word is Protoss, which means first. It's basically the Greek word for first. And it means first in rank or chronological time. Priority in rank or first in chronological time. Or you could say priority in chronological time. And when we look at the rest of it, it means first of me he was. And, that might not look much sense to you if you only read English, but Greek looks like this all the time. Word order isn't that important. That, in English we would say that he was first of me. And when we understand how the sentence ends, this is probably how that Greek word should be translated. It should be translated as probably a since rather than that. The word that can make sense if you think about it the right way. But this makes sense out of the passage. Since first of me he was. So what does that mean? First of me. Okay, well, we've already seen that it likely does not refer to time. This is he on behalf of whom I said, after me comes a man. Well, that's not really going to work. Jesus the human didn't pre-exist Jesus the human. That doesn't work. If this verse said, after me comes someone, that would be fine. But it says, after me comes a man. And that's not, to suggest that Trinitarians deny Jesus was a man. Everybody knows they believe he was a man. That's not the point here. The point here is the language being used strongly suggests right off the bat that, the Apostle John can't be writing about John the Baptist saying a human being pre-existed Jesus the human being. It's somewhat implausible. You could spin doctor it to make it work, but if you're honest with yourself, you're going to say something seems wrong here. And so what we have to ask ourselves, well, does this mean first in time or first in rank? The answer is pretty easy if you just look at the context. We're told at John 1:27 what it means. He who comes after me, the thong of whose sandal I am not worthy to untie. It's about first in rank. It's about the fact that Jesus is superior to John. We're told right here at John 1:27. And this language, by the way, is the same language again. He who comes after me, it's that apiso word that we're seeing at John 1:15. He who comes behind me, or he who is coming behind me, the thong of whose sandal I am not worthy to untie. You see how he's basically saying the same thing again at verse 27 as he does in verse 15. The thong of whose sandal I am worthy to untie. He's first of me. And because he's first of me, has a higher rank than me, I'm unworthy to untie his sandal. So what does all of that Greek mean? It means John the Baptist was sent in front of Jesus, ahead of Jesus. Jesus is the one who is coming behind John, and he has come to be in front of John because the ministry of Jesus takes priority over John. In other words, John came to announce this happening with Jesus, this ministry. The ministry of Jesus takes priority over John. That's all we're being told here in John. The one coming behind me has come to be in front of me since he was superior to me. Jesus ranks higher than John. And again, we see the same thing in this passage a little later on. John was sent in front of Jesus, but then John the Baptist says, he must increase, but I must decrease. In other words, my ministry, it's got to wind up, because his in it, when mine was just to basically announce the ministry of Jesus, and once his ministry starts, mine winds down and his takes off, and Jesus overtakes me. He must increase, but I must decrease. John testified about him and cried out, saying, this was he of whom I said, he who comes behind me has come to be in front of me because he is superior to me. Do you see anything there about pre-existence? This Trinitarian notion of pre-existence? It's not even there. Not even there. Or you might say it this way, because this is the idea. He who comes behind me has come to be in front of me because he has priority over me. It's another way you might say it. Or again, he who comes behind me has come to be in front of me because he's more important than me. Jesus is more important than John. I went ahead of him, and he's coming behind me. But that doesn't mean he's following me and my footsteps. He's overtaking me. Jesus must increase and I must decrease. Right? And that's basically what's going on at John 1:15 and John 1:30, and really at John 1:27 as well. He who comes behind me, the thong of whose sandal I am not worthy to untie. The one coming after me, Jesus, is going to be in front of me because he has a higher rank than me. He is more worthy than me. I'm not even worthy to untie his sandal. He's first of me in that way. So, what I suggest you do, if you haven't, is if you don't know any Greek at all or whatever, just get an interlinear and start looking up what each of those words mean. And you'll see that some translations, at least, like the one we looked at, the New American Standard, do some pretty wild things with the text to come up with the spin that they've got there. And you'll also see that there's nothing there to suggest this Trinitarian notion of pre-existence. They're getting this notion because of the way they spin the text when they translate it. Yet there's no reason to get that out of the translation of those Greek words. It doesn't talk about Jesus existing before John anywhere in the Greek. When I first looked at this, I was almost couldn't believe they were translating it the way they were, because it doesn't even say that in the Greek. And then I should point out, there's a manuscript variant. I don't know how significant the variant is, but there's a manuscript variant at John 1:27, which we also looked at. Isn't that weird how there's so many significant variants that pertain to Trinitarian doctrine? I don't know if this one's really significant or not, but is the variant just a late manuscript variant, in other words? I think the King James Bible uses a different variant than, say, the NIV, for example. And I haven't looked into that variant that much, but it looks like this is why it was messed with almost. The stuff we're talking about here. So it might take you some time to digest, that the Greek text and the Greek the translation of the Greek language there, and why it works the way it does. And when you sort of digest it all, and you'll be able to see clearly, there's not even anything there talking about pre-existence. It's not there. It just says Jesus has come to be in front of John. Well, yeah, we know that happened. We know that happened. We know that John was ahead of Jesus. And then Jesus came later behind John and then came to be in front of John. And then John tells us in verse 15 and verse 30 of chapter 1, the reason. It's because Jesus is superior. He's more important than John. He takes priority over John the Baptist. That's it. That's what it says. Hope that helps you. God bless you.